In this tutorial, we're going to go through how to make a basic mad weave and also how to create corners so that you can create a mad weave basket. This will be the final product by the end of this video. To start, you'll need 3 colors of paper strips, about a 1/2 inch by 18 inches, a pile of small alligator clips with no teeth. If you don't have these, small clothespins will also do in a pinch. It's also helpful to keep some scissors nearby, as well as something that you can use to push weavers through. A small flathead screwdriver also works. To finish the rim, we're going to use waxed linen thread, beeswax, and a tapestry needle. Before we begin, we're going to take a look at what the mad weave actually is, and some patterns that will help us recognize what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong. The mad weave is a triaxial weave, which means it has weavers running on 3 axes. It may look confusing at first, but there are many patterns that we can identify that we can use as guides. The first is this Z or S shape that passes over every strand. You can use this as a guide when you are threading your weavers through, because you know that it's always going to come out on the other side of this Z bridge. Another important pattern to look for is the 6-pointed star. The star is the basis for all of our corners, which we'll talk about more later. There's also this hexagonal shape that I'll be referring to as the triad, which is where 3 weavers meet. And lastly, it's important to note that every time a weaver is exposed, you can see it in the shape of a parallelogram. And it's the same shape parallelogram with the same angles, no matter which direction it's rotated. To start our base, we're going to take 3 different colored weavers and arrange them overlapping, like so. It's helpful to note which ones you're starting with, and you can mark in pencil if you want, but for this video, I'm going to show you with these red lines. When I take my 4th weaver, I'll be putting it in between 2 of the pre-existing weavers, like so. And this is where it's important to know which weavers you started with, because you're always going to sandwich it in between those starting weavers. And for the purple weaver, again, we're doing the same. Even though we have a few extra weavers here, we're still going to sandwich it between those. So now we've completed the first step of the base, and if you look closely, you'll notice that it's a 6-pointed star. The next pattern we're going to be focusing on is the triad. So you can see this V shape on the side here. If I put the purple weaver in, it forms the triad shape. Now it does it on the front, but it also does it on the back. So the front and the back need to form that triad. It's helpful to keep on turning your piece upside down and back again so that you're making sure that you're doing this correctly. And here we have our 3rd weaver in purple. So we're going to keep doing this, finding that triad with each color. And as I go, I'm using the alligator clips to keep it in position. If it gets too loose, it can fall apart and get frustrating. So at this point, we have enough weavers in that we can start using other techniques like the Z bridge pattern to figure out where our next weaver is going to go. So as you see, it's going to go in one side of the Z, or S in this orientation, and out the other side. As you put more weavers in and keep it clipped up, it's also going to get very tight. So keeping some scissors nearby is helpful. Just taking your scissors and cutting a little point into your weaver will make it much easier to pass through. So now I'm finding that Z again and sticking it in one side and pulling it back out the other side. So I now have 4 weavers on each axis of my base. Again, keeping it clipped up makes it straighter and keeps it from falling apart. And I like to check it periodically on the other side to make sure it looks right. And again, this is our star shape that we're seeing, and we're going to keep that in the middle. So as we're adding more weavers, we're going to add 1 to the top and bottom of each axis for a grand total of 6 weavers. Now I'm finishing up my base, and I know that I've made a few mistakes. So once again, I'm going to flip it over and look for mistakes. If you want, you can pause your screen here and see if you can find the 3 mistakes I've made. So here you can see my first mistake. I can tell it's incorrect because the triad is not made up of parallelograms. It has a triangle. Over here it's the same thing. Instead of a parallelogram showing through, it looks like a triangle. And then there's a third mistake here. Again, the same issue, but I'm going to tighten some things up before I get to that one. It's fine to make mistakes, but it's helpful to be able to see what your mistakes are so that you can fix them. And now I'm going to flip it back over, double check, and I have finished my base. Now this hexagon that I've superimposed over this image is going to be my base, and it's going to be where my corners are. You may wish to draw on yours with pencil so that you can see more clearly where your base is going to be and where your corners are going to be. So with this next weaver, it's going to be going up into 3 dimensions and wrap around the hexagon. I'm going to start it the same way that I start every new weaver, by finding where it's going to go into the pattern and pulling it through. Now this is the tricky part because we have to turn the corner. So the corner of this hexagon is going to be the corner of my basket. So you're going to follow the same rules and find the triad, or find that V shape that you're putting the next weaver into, but it's just going to turn around that corner. And then as I pull it through, it's going to pull the whole fabric of the basket around so that it's no longer flat. And you'll begin to see that the same rules still apply. You've still created a triad at the bottom, and pulling it tight will make your corner nice and tight. And also, instead of a 6-pointed star, we've made a 5-pointed star. 5-pointed stars will turn the corners of this basket. And then keep adding clips to keep it in place as you keep going around. So again, this is where having a pencil drawing on your basket is helpful, but you're still going to keep following the rules. So I know that I have to go out of this Z shape, this S shape, as I put it through. And when I pull it out, it creates another 5-pointed star. And cinching that triad at the bottom and clipping it together is going to keep that corner nice and tight. So now I've made 2 corners, I've got 4 more to go, and I'm going to keep going around after I've tightened up this side a little bit. Remember that even on the inside of the basket, it's like flipping it around and seeing if you've made any mistakes. Pay attention to your inside so that you're still cinching those triads together on the inside of your basket. So once you get all the way to the end, the two ends of your weaver are going to meet. Simply thread the weaver back through the other side, and this is where having something long and thin to push it through is helpful. And then just gently pull it tight. And you have completed the first row of your basket. Cinch things up, get them nice and tight, and that will hold it in place. You can pass your weaver through one more time, but make sure you still leave a little tail. This will help you tighten everything up toward the end. Now before I get to my second row, I'm just straightening up my first row, making sure that everything is in its right place and is clipped nice and tight. So for your second row, choose a different color and make sure that the ends of your weavers don't match up perfectly. Having them offset a little bit will make your basket stronger and make the next row less likely to fall apart. Now if you're not sure where to start, just remember our patterns. I can see the 6-pointed star, and I know that I need to put a weaver into the side of it in order to complete it. So that's helping me figure out where I'm starting my next row. And again, it's going through that Z pattern and out the other side. And again, make sure you don't line up your next row of weavers, and keep going using the same pattern, the same rules. I feel like the second row is much easier than the first row because you're not wrestling with how to make the corners. You're just continuing the same pattern that you've been building out this whole time. So over here is a part where I've realized I've made a mistake. The star pattern, the 6-pointed star, isn't looking right, and my triad isn't made up of parallelograms. So it's no big deal. I just switch my weavers around and change the orientation until I massage it into the pattern that I want it to look like. You'll also notice as you keep going up the sides that unfortunately that beautiful optical illusion cube pattern that we have at our base doesn't translate up to the sides of the basket. And unfortunately for this method there's no way around that, and we'd have to start from the sides in order to achieve that effect. So at this point when you're going through the sides of your basket, you should be less reliant on the color pattern and more reliant on the pattern of the weavers to dictate what your next move is going to be. Now I've finished my second row, and I'm going to just keep going, following the same rules with the third row. Now here's my finished product, 7 rows up. I've still got the rim to go, but I've finished all of my weaving. To start, I'm going to just give the top a little bit of a haircut. This isn't completely necessary, but it's going to be helpful for me so that I can see what I'm doing while I am stitching on the rim. Be careful not to cut it all the way down to your final row. I'm leaving about a row's worth of space up on the top. This helps it stay together with the clips as I'm putting the rim together, and also gives me a little bit of room to pull and keep things tight. I'm going to prepare for my rim by getting this top row nice and tight and also pulling this weaver all the way through like so. Now I'm going to take 2 of the same color, and these pieces are going to form my rim. The first piece is going to go around the outside, keeping it as tight as possible. Wrap it around the rim. And then clip it to the top row of weavers. You'll be able to see on your basket the best places to clip it so that it's actually connected to the material of the basket. Now the interior one is a little bit trickier. You want it to be flush and you want it to be tight, but it can be a little bit tricky to get it all the way in. If you want to, you can also trim your weaver a little bit so it isn't quite so long. And just like the outside one, add some clips to keep it in place and clip it right to the basket, right to that 7th row weaver. Right, and now I've got my rim clipped on. It's time to get the linen thread, beeswax, and tapestry needle. I'm going to take about a wingspan's worth of thread. It helps to put some beeswax on it, especially if it's not already waxy. This makes it easier to tie knots, and it also kind of holds it in place as you're sewing the rim shut, and it helps keep the tension. So now I can start anywhere under the rim, in between any 2 weavers. So you're going to put it from the outside in, and make sure you leave a little bit of a tail. This will help tie it later. I'm going to bring it up at a diagonal. This requires a little bit of navigating around the weaver scraps that we have on top. And then again at a diagonal back under the rim so that it's nice and tight. And I'll do a second one following the same pattern. So you can see from the inside, the thread is wrapping all the way around every layer of the rim, and it's just going at a diagonal. So I'm going to keep going all the way around the basket. When I get to the other end, I'll keep going. So now I'm going to take this tail again, put it on the inside. It's helpful to have your tail nice and long because you have more flexibility, and it's also easier to tie the knot on the inside of your basket. For now, I'm going to just figure out the best way to arrange it so that I can keep the tension but bring my main thread in the other direction. So we've been going right around the basket. Now we're going to go left around the basket and form a V shape with the thread. I'm going to just do one right now to get the thread on the inside, and then I'm going to take care of some cosmetic issues with the basket. So it's helpful to get it to the inside so that I can stuff all of the thread inside. Now I'm going to take care of my loose weavers on the outside. I'm simply going to cut them and then stuff them right in. As you're doing this, make sure that you are applying tension, but not so much tension that you're going to rip your paper. Again, having something flat, like a flathead screwdriver or something similar, is really helpful to shove the weavers into place. And I'm going to just keep doing this for every row. So now that the sides are all set, I'm going to focus on the top and just slice off the ends of the weavers here, staying flush to the rim of the basket. Make sure that you don't accidentally clip the waxed linen, or else you'll have to go back and re-sew. And here we have a finished rim. We're just going to finish up with the sewing. So keep going in the new diagonal direction, keep wrapping around, and make it all the way to the end. And once you get to the end, just tie off your thread on the inside of the basket and you'll be finished.